Good evening, everybody. Whether you're watching live or the recording on YouTube or Spotify, hope you're all doing well. As a reminder, these shiurim are dedicated in memory of my maternal grandparents, Menachem ben David Tzvi and Alana Basara. May their neshamas have the highest of aliyahs. In Shiur 21, that's the last year that we had before Rosh Hashanah, we were learning the beginning of paragraph Kuf Chavav in Chayei Moharan. We're still dealing with the early life of Rabbi Nachman, his birthplace, his residence, and his travels. But we're towards the end of that section, honestly. We have probably only two more shiurim until we reach a very exciting part of the Sefer, which deals with Rabbi Nachman's trip to Eretz Yisrael. And we split Kuf Chavav, that was the lesson before that we were learning, into two, because I felt like one part was very relevant to Rosh Hashanah, and the other part I felt was something we could share post Rosh Hashanah. So that's how we decided to split it up. But as a quick recap, because this is all one paragraph, the first part dealt with like two contrasting sides of Rabbeinu's derech. There was silence and urging. And Rabbeinu had met Shmuel Zayda, one of Rabbi Nachman's adversaries, and the Sefer only referred to him as the Zaken. And he had met the Zaken in Berditchev and stayed completely silent about him and what he had gone through for quite a few years. And he was showing us that through silence and through patience and through waiting for clarity, that is even higher than speech itself. Something else that we saw another extreme when it came to Rosh Hashanah and Rabbi Nachman's Rosh Hashanah, that Rabbi Nachman could never stay silent about that. And he established 3 fixed times when his followers should gather to him. That was Rosh Hashanah, Shavuos, and Shabbos Chanukah, but said that Rosh Hashanah stands above all of them, and that is really the highest thing, and that Rabbi Nachman's whole mission was Rosh Hashanah. In that shiur, we also spoke more about Uman Rosh Hashanah today, and now it's not just some nostalgic custom, but it's something that's really like living the continuation of that call from Rabbi Nachman. This year, Baruch Hashem, they said there's around 60,000 people that were there, myself included. So that was really very, very special and a great way to start off the new year. It always is. And we also discussed some common questions like the distractions, the opposition that's faced, or who goes? Is it just men? Do women go as well? We discussed that, so I highly recommend listening to that shiur. And we discussed also some of the resistance and how many things that face resistance, especially when they're related to Kedusha, shows how high that thing really is. So, and we closed with encouragement for those who can't go, that their connection to the tzaddik should only grow no matter where they are geographically located. Just touching on that one idea before we get started tonight, I watched a video last night where, I'm not going to name any names of who this rabbi was, but he made a very interesting and very unique statement that I thought maybe it's kedai, maybe it's suitable for us to talk about here, considering that the fact that the past few shiurim that we've had dealt a lot with the resistance that Rabbi Nachman initially faced. But I think Breslov today still faces a lot of resistance. There's a lot of people who simply don't understand anything about Breslov. All they see is perhaps people who make a little bit of noise, but don't necessarily represent the true mission of Rabbi Nachman. And this statement that this rabbi was saying, that he said that many people who join Yiddishkeit, whether they're Gerim or Bali Tshuva, and are still trying to find their place, he said that these people tend to find two different groups in Yiddishkeit very often. He was just making a statement that they can be split between two different Hasidus. Obviously, we can guess who they are. They're Chabad and Breslov. So he's making a very interesting statement that perhaps these people who are looking for more, they're looking for spirituality, they found the emes within Yiddishkeit. He was saying, and this is very brave of him to say, I won't say anything more about that these people are still connected to something outside of their Yiddishkeit, or while they were experiencing that part of their life, that they are still stuck in a Christian mentality. We're dealing with the Messiah and Yoshka, and therefore they have to find some sort of intermediary, and therefore they feel connected to Chabad and Breslov. His words, not mine. I'm just quoting, I'm like paraphrasing what he was saying. So often when we find these things that will, you can either say that they trigger us or they lead us to begin thinking. These things are never by chance. Sometimes you might just be scrolling your feed and that could be chanceful, but when something hits you like that one does, sometimes you're left thinking a little bit, and that one left me thinking too. And I think for many people who are new to Breslov or don't really fully understand it, don't really get what the connection to a tzaddik can really do with your growth in Yiddishkeit and how you view Judaism as a whole. I think very often people, when they are Bali Tshuva or they're Gerim, or even within Yiddishkeit itself, because there are shards and there are parts of Yiddishkeit at the moment which seem really fractured. So when you feel so connected to it and you see the beauty of living a Torah lifestyle truly is, and that connection to Hashem and how pure and beautiful it is, it's very easy to feel disenfranchised and lost because you feel something so close, and then you see these parts that are so fractured, and you're like, there's a dichotomy. It's really strange. But I think within the emes of Breslov and within the emes of Chabad, or spiritual movements similar to that, you can really find the beauty and emes and connection to Hashem. So if you're looking for that, and you're trying to come close to Hashem, I think it has nothing to do with an intermediary. And this is where I was taking his words and trying to understand where he's coming from. And frankly, I would like to say that I don't agree with that, because Yiddishkeit is beautiful. And when you're connected to Breslov and you're connected to a tzaddik, and it shows you how you can really connect to Hashem on a very intimate level, that has nothing to do with an intermediate. It more has to do with how beautiful you can find Hashem even without the dark, even through, I would say, the darkness. Va'afilu b'hastara. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit tonight as we learn how Rabbi Nachman and when he would teach his teachings. So I feel like that was a nice little intro. It was something relevant to something I had seen this week. And I feel like with that, we can now get started to learn about when and how Rabbi Nachman taught his lofty discourses. So we're going to learn a list of times and a list of places. But without further ado, let's dive in. It's been too long. We haven't learned since the week before, like a week and a half before Rosh Hashanah, maybe if not 2 weeks. It's been a while. So without further ado, let's get started with class 22. We are in the second half of Kuf Chavav. If you're looking inside, we're on the paragraph that starts with Va'od Shalish Pa'amim on Kuf Nun Daled in the Hebrew. And if you have the BRI version of Tzaddik, we are on page 62. Oh, actually, my bad. We're on page 61. It continues on to 62. Okay. Here we go. Writes Reb Nosson, Va'od Shalish Pa'amim Bashana Amar Torah Bikvios. Furthermore, says Reb Nosson that 3 times a year, Rabbi Nachman had set times where he teaches his lofty discourses. Hainu shahaya nosea lechirin uleteravitza, pam achas b'chor v'yashav sham al hashalish sudas v'amar shtei pamim Torah. So he would teach when he would travel to the city of Chirin and the city of Teravitza, and this was one time in the winter, and he would stay there and he'd teach by Shalashudas, and there he'd teach twice while he was there. Hainu b'Shabbos Shira, v'oid ezo b'Shabbos. So he would also teach Shabbos Shira, and one other Shabbos. V'gam b'Kayetz, haya nois l'sham, and also in the spring and the summer he would also travel there. Avaloi Amar Torah rak pam achas b'Chirin b'Shabbos Nachamu, but he would only teach Torah once on Shabbos Nachamu. So, something really cool here. So, Rabbi Nachman would teach basically, formally, there were 6 different times during the year that Rabbi Nachman would teach. 3 of them, we're calling it bebeisoi, as in like in his headquarters in Breslov, where this is taking place at the time. And then there were another 3 times where we're calling baderech, on the way. So bebeisoi, those 3 times were Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos Chanukah, and by Shavuos. And then the 3 times that was baderech while he was traveling was Shabbos Nachamu, Shabbos Shira, and then one other Shabbos. It wasn't exactly set when that was, but there was going to be one Shabbos during the year. And we're going to get to that in a moment, because I think there's something really cool about those 6 times. I've found some sort of significance that I feel is quite amazing. So, but we're going to get to that in a moment. So, klal hadover. So the general rule here, she'elu sheish pa'amim hanal, that these were 6 times. Hainu shalish pa'amim bebeisoi, v'shalish pa'amim baderech. As we just mentioned, there were 6 times set at home, and 6 times while Rabbi Nachman was traveling. Haya oimer Torah b'kvios, that he would say a Torah discourse at a set time. V'chutz mizeh loy haya loy shum kvios la'amiras Torah. Other than that, Rabbi Nachman didn't have like a set time where he'd give a scholarly discourse. Ki loy haya yoshev imanu al hasuda shlishis klal. Oftentimes, at these 6 different occasions when they occurred on Shabbos, the lessons usually were given during Shalosh Shudas. That's the 3rd meal on Shabbos, which is known as Raiva de Raivin. That's the highest point on Shabbos, right when we're on that borderline between Shkia, the sun is setting, leaving Shabbos into the week. That time, right before dusk, is known as the highest point of Shabbos. This is usually when Rabbi Nachman would give his most formal discourses. So what was happening the rest of the year? During Shalosh Shudas, if Rabbi Nachman wasn't speaking, Rabbi Nachman was actually known to spend Shalosh Shudas, that holiest time of Shabbos, actually in his own time, in his own seclusion, having Shalosh Shudas just by himself, obviously spending time meditating and davening and doing his ploidus clearly with Hashem, spending that time in holy seclusion. Rak afal pichein shamanu mimenu Torah harbe gam b'chol hashana. Nevertheless, writes Reb Nosson, it wasn't just that Rabbi Nachman wouldn't speak any other time of the year besides for these 6 times. It was just more that these were formally set times, and Rabbi Nachman would obviously teach less formal teachings throughout the year. Rak shloi hay kvios azman lezeh. There was no these weren't set. Rak b'chol eish sheniz damein shezakinu Hashem yisbarach. But at any moment, whether we were ready or not, Rabbi Nachman would teach something. Hainu zoichim lishmoim mipiv Torah nifla, would be able to hear really lofty, wonderful Torahs from his mouth. Lifamim b'leil Shabbos kodesh. Sometimes they were Friday night. V'lifamim Shabbos b'boker. Sometimes it was Shabbos morning. V'lifamim b'motzei Shabbos. Sometimes it was Motzei Shabbos. Achar Havdalah. V'lifamim b'me'achol. Sometimes after Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos, and sometimes during the week. So it wasn't exactly set times, but there were 6 set times that Rabbi Nachman would teach. So I found something really cool, but connecting these 6 times. You know me, we're 22 shiurim into Chayei Moharan now, and you know how I like to find different connections, something we can be able to take away from these lessons rather than just like learning about the tzaddik's life, which in itself is really good, but something we can take away and perhaps apply. And I found that so these 6 times we had Shabbos Shira, which is the parsha where we read Oz Yashir. That's so Parshas Beshalach. So when that Torah is being read, when that parsha is read, it's known as Shabbos Shira. We have Shabbos Nachamu, which is the comfort after the destruction. That's read in the summertime. Summertime if you're in the northern hemisphere, in Eretz Yisrael if you're in the southern hemisphere, Australia. So that's going to be a different time of year, but that's another point. But anyway, that always follows Tisha B'Av, and that's Shabbos Nachamu. Then we've got Hanukkah, the light in the darkest time of the year. Also, if you happen to be in the northern hemisphere, but typically for most of the world, it's wintertime. We just set the clocks now, so the times are dark. the day is not very long and the nights are very, very long. So we need to light the menorah to be able to bring lightness into the world. We've got Shavuos, and we've got Rosh Hashanah. So each of these 6 times, I've realized that there's an idea of hischadshus, there's renewal, and there's also the idea of darkness. And there's Yeridas, the lows, and we've also got the aliyahs, we've got the highs. And how's that the case? So Shabbos Shira, it's the song that was sung once the Bnei Yisrael had crossed the Yam Suf, so they had an extreme point of danger. That was a serious low. Hashem saved them. They crossed through the river. Boom, they had an aliyah. That's one Yerida to another aliyah. So that's one connection. Shabbos Nachamu, we have the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, an extremely sad, heartbreaking time in the Jewish calendar, the loss of the Shekhinah, but then we read Shabbos Nachamu, and that's a point of comfort from Hashem. So, there we go. We have another low, and then another high, because we've got comfort coming directly from Hashem. Nachamu Ami. Chanukah, lowest, very low point of the year. There's Hastar, there's darkness. We know Hastar, B'soich Hastar, within the concealment, there's Hashem. So, low point, really dark time of the year, but then we light the menorah, Chanukah, so there's an aliyah. So there we go. Now, how does that work for Shavuos? In Shavuos, there's 49 days of counting, and that represents the 49 levels of Tumah that Bnei Yisrael were in that state coming out of Mitzrayim. They were on really the lowest depths of Tumah, and one of the reasons we count 49 is to be able to count that preparation up from the lowest level all the way to the highest level to be able to be ready for Kabbalah Torah. So there we go, another Yerida to the Aliyah. And Rosh Hashanah, how does Rosh Hashanah connect with like going down and coming up, Yeridas and Aliyahs? Because we start from a level of tshuva, beginning of Elul, where we begin the tshuva process, all the way until Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur. So once we get to also Rosh Hashanah, though, we've had a whole month to be able to prepare ourselves for Yom Adin, the Day of Judgment, and to be able to crown Hashem. So we've gone from a level lower than we were before in the month of Elul, all the way to Rosh Hashanah, where we're ready to be able to crown Hashem as our King. The one other Shabbos, obviously it could be 7 days of the week that it's the low, and then boom, we get Shabbos, which is the highest time of the week. So also the fact that it's Shalosh Shudas that Rabbi Nachman would teach also meant that it's the highest point of Shabbos. So I just thought that was really cool that I wanted to share. So we have that idea of Yeridas and Aliyahs even in these 6 times that Rabbi Nachman would teach his Torahs. So, continuing on, Reb Nassim writes, "V'chama pa'amim nizdamein." There were other times shemitoich sichato shehaya mesiach amesaper imanu harbe meiskei ha'olam v'hainu medabrim imay kol ma shenizdamein l'toich pino. So the other times, what was happening? The less formal teachings. So Rabbi Nachman would be discussing matters involved, like going on in the world, common occurrences, things that were happening in their community, and whatever came to the mouths of the Chassidim, this is what they would discuss with Rabbi Nachman. And afterwards, once they were discussing with Rabbi Nachman, obviously they were related to Torah matters. Once they had finished those discussions, they then merited to hear some Torah from Rabbi Nachman. And these teachings were within the conversations that were being had. And they were like these were regular conversations that were happening. And what happened? It took some time, but eventually, through those discussions, they actually realized that within those discussions that were taking place, Rabbi Nachman was actually fitting in Torah within those conversations. And each time this began to happen, they started paying more and more attention to what they thought was just simple conversations. And they were listening that every single discussion, every time Rabbi Nachman would speak, he was speaking with these wonderful, beautiful Torahs. until they actually began to write down all these conversations of Aloy Nichtav Chelek Me'ela or Me'elef or Ravava. But unfortunately, there were a lot, and I'm sure you can imagine how amazing these conversations must have been. But unfortunately, they didn't write them down until they mamish came to that realization. And it doesn't say here explicitly, but we can just infer that the sefer that we have, Sichas Aran, which is all those informal teachings from Rabbi Nachman, a lot of them based on conversations, a lot of them are related to teachings in Likutei Moharan, but often what seems like just conversations are actually these really deep Torahs. And we have a sefer recorded obviously by Rabbi Nosson and some of his other students, instead of Rabbi Nachman's other students, that record these teachings. It's amazing to think that these aren't all the teachings, and there's some that are out there that we'll never get to hear until Mashiach comes. So, really, really wild stuff. So, continuing on in the Sefer, Ashrei ha'es, Ashrei ha'shah, Ashrei ha'rega. I love this line. Praiseworthy be the time, praiseworthy be the hour, praise be the moment. So his students are mamish saying, and Reb Nosson is recording this line, that those moments were just so precious, to be able to even be in those informal conversations, to be able to hear these lofty Torahs from Rabbi Nachman. That we are able to hear from his holy mouth. And if Hashem were to give us even just 1 moment, 1 hour, hayinu miskagalim alafim parsais ba'afar kidei lizkois lavai lefanav lishmaya hevel pivakadosh ha'oila al kol hakadoshos. And writes Rabbi Nosson here, and this is what his students were willing to roll thousands of miles, thousands of parsas, a great distance, in the dirt in order to be able to hear the words from Rabbi Nachman's holy mouth. But I think this is now a really good time to share that every time we learn a sefer from Rabbi Nachman, a sefer from one of his students, a lesson from one of his students that was recorded, anything written down or shared orally from Rabbi Nachman actually is part of the tzaddik's knowledge, his das himself. And Rabbi Nachman writes this in Likutei Moharan Tinyana, Torah Zion. That's the second part of Likutei Moharan, and it's the 7th lesson there. And if you're part of Kol HaTorah's Chaim, right here on this channel, if you're watching recorded on YouTube, that Rabbi Gisselson is beginning to teach this lesson in Likutei Moharan. I myself have begun learning it with several friends of mine, and it is a really beautiful, lofty, incredible lesson about leadership and connecting to the tzaddik. And just one of the coolest things that we've learned so far is that a tzaddik, before he leaves this physical world, must leave a student or a son that has the level of a student, meaning he's given over some of his Torah knowledge to his student and to his son. And when he does that, when he leaves that, and he imparts his own das and his own wisdom with that student or with that son that's considered a student, then that brings the tzaddik's das into this world and lets it remain in its entirety here down below. So every time we're learning something from Chayei Moharan or from Likutei Moharan, a Sichas Aran, or we're reading any book that was printed by the Breslov Research Institute or any other Breslov publisher, or a parsha sheet that connects to Rabbi Nachman, we're connecting with the tzaddik himself. And I think that's absolutely incredible that we have that chain and we have that connection. And Ashreinu, how worthy are we, and how amazing is it to be connected to something so beautiful, and to be connected to such an amazing tzaddik. So with that, it was a little bit shorter for our first week back, but nevertheless just as sweet as ever. So I think if I could leave you with some practical chizuk for this week, perhaps let's try noticing where Hashem's Torah or his hashgacha pratis, his divine providence, shows up in even ordinary moments, just as those conversations that Rabbi Nachman had with his students seemed to be quite ordinary, they were able to find the beautiful depth and Torah within those conversations. Let's try looking for how perhaps Hashem is speaking to us in our own lives in what seem like ordinary moments, whether it's a conversation with friends or a lyric from some sort of music that we're listening to or a book that we are reading. Because kol sichato Torah, all those conversations have Torah, they have emes, and we can find the emes, and we can find Hashem in all those moments. So may we merit to be able to live with that awareness, to hear Torah, not just with our ears, but also with our hearts. And may Rabbeinu's light continue to guide us, even between shiurim, in every single word we speak and every breath we take. So, have a fantastic week, and I am looking forward to Chayei Moharan Shiur 23 already. Can't wait to see you all there.
אין ייאוש בעולם כלל, עם שמחה, עם דיבור, עם אמונה פשוטה.